Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. And today I have another book review, book related video, vlog kind of thing. And since it is currently May, in the month of May, one of my favorite monthly challenges happened, which is Mermaid. So if you're not familiar with Mermaid, it basically is the idea that every day, or almost, you try to at least every day in the month of May, do a drawing of a mermaid. So because I'm such a mermaid fan, I wanted to sort of extend this idea into other areas of my interests. So today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my review of Tempest Rising, as well as sharing you with all of the physical mermaid books that I own and I've read. I will not be including any sort of digital ebook kind of mermaid stories because there are some that I have read and a ton I haven't read yet. But if I do something on those, it will be in the form of maybe like a blog post or something like that. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this and start with my review of Tempest Rising. So I mentioned this book at the end of my Cruel Prince review, which I absolutely love that book. So if you're curious about the Cruel Prince, go ahead and check that out. But I really wanted to like this book because, of course, it's mermaid theme. I love the mermaids. But I ended up rating this book 2 stars. Part of me wanted to maybe bump it up a little bit higher to maybe like 2.5, but especially after finding out sort of a spoiler-ish thing about how the other 2 books in this trilogy end, yeah, I'm fine with going with 2 stars. So, and that's to say, if any of you guys enjoyed this book, like, more power to you. If you enjoyed it, that's fantastic. But for me, it was a big oopsie. So, first off, I want to say that this is definitely more heavy on the romance side of things than necessarily the action that's taking place. There was just more things I disliked about this book than I liked. And starting off with just the actual physical writing of it, I don't know much of the backstory of this author and how many books she has written besides this. But when I read this, it definitely felt like almost the first go of a book because a lot of it was written in passive voice. And so me doing the research that I have about how to write stories and stuff like that, you really want to avoid doing too much of passive writing, and that's what so much of this book was. As far as characters go, I did not like Tempest. I thought she was quite irritating and annoying, especially as far as like this whole thing, like she knows that she's a mermaid, but she doesn't want to accept it. She's fighting it too hard. I can't stand that. I mean, I think there's some other books here that I have that are along those same lines, but they're handled in a much better way as far as the character handling the situation. Her human boyfriend, what is his name? Mark or something. I could not stand him. He came off as way too grabby, jealous kind of thing, and that's part of my issue of why I'm definitely not going to read any other books in this series because of what I've learned. And, you know, I will say, you know, it took forever for this book to even get up to any, like, the interesting action. The later half of it was a little bit better. Majority of the beginning half and parts of the later half I did skim. And, yeah, so the later half was a little bit more interesting because we got to see more of, I think you say his name, Kona. His character, between him and Tempest, it was a little bit more interesting, but still, like, a lot of the dialogue felt very strange. Just very odd. There's also something that I saw, and it made me like go, huh, when I read it as well, and so many other people in the reviews of this book also brought it up. There was like a line about how she was trying to Tempest was comparing Kona to like a spider, and then he was like, oh, thanks for like comparing me to a blood-sucking bug, and she's like, spiders aren't a bug, they're an insect, and everybody's just like, that's not right. Okay, so just long story short, I did not like it. It has some issues. I'm very thankful that I didn't actually spend a lot of money on this book. I got it actually pretty cheap at like a used book kind of place, so that's the only thing I'll say on that. 2 stars. Not continuing at all to read this. I'm very disappointed. moving on, let's get into some other books that didn't disappoint me, although I do have criticisms for some of these, because some of them are a little bit lower rated, in my opinion, than other ones. But the point being, I obviously bought all the books in the series. I finished reading all of them, so that should go to say that they obviously had something a lot better to present than some other books. So starting off, I'm going to go in order of, like, age range and kind of subject matter for each one. So starting off with the middle grade book that I had to recommend, and that is the Swishy Tales of Emily Windsnap. I got this little 3-book set a bajillion years ago, and I loved it. You know, it's a very sweet, easy read. It's for mostly, like, the age ranges of, like, 8 to 12, but this is actually a book series that I would read in between, like, my book hangover ones. Like, I finished a really long, exciting, action-packed book, and you're just kind of like, I don't know what to read now. I'm just kind of like still stuck in that book. So that's what I would read in between those books at the time, were these, because obviously they're a really easy read because of the age group for them, and they were just really sweet. So one thing I will say, so back in the day when these first came out and I first read them, it was only the 3 books. And so with the ending of The Castle in the Mist, which is book 3, it left it, I mean, it completed the storyline for that book, but it introduced so many interesting characters in this interesting situation and world that so many of the fans were like, please, Liz, I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing this right, Liz Kessler, please write more. And eventually she did. And so we got book 4, The Siren's Secret, and then we got book 5, The Land of Midnight Sun. There's also a couple other ones that have come out recently. I have not read them yet, but overall I would rate this series like somewhere in between like a 3-star and a 4-star, because it was good. You know, I think, especially for the age group that this is geared towards, it was a very good book series. I would highly recommend it for anybody who has any sort of younger people in their life who might be interested in something mermaid related and may not be ready to handle some of the other books in my list here. Yes, this is just a fun series, so I would recommend it. Moving on, so diving into the larger majority of these books, which are in the YA genre, of course, we're going into one that's a little bit, I think, is a nice stepping point from here to this next one. So that is the Waterfire Saga. So really cool. Love the cover on most of these books. I'll get to that in a second. It's actually really funny because there's actually like a music video for this book series and a song. I think it was done by B. Miller. And reading this series was very nostalgic for me because it reminded me a lot of one of the first sort of magical girl animes I watched, which was called Mermaid Melody. And Mermaid Melody, if I wanted to break it down into its most basic plot thing, and similarly to how I'd break down this, it was essentially like a bunch of mermaid princesses from all these different parts of the ocean coming together to fight evil. Kind of the same deal with this. You know, it's a bunch of different mermaids, some of them not so much princesses or whatnot, but they come together to fight evil. That's like the easiest way I can go about it. There is a little bit of romance in here, but it's not super heavy on the romance aspect. It's more heavy on the actual action and the relationship between the girls, you know, in battling out this evil. So, book 1, Deep Blue, very good, lovely cover. Rogue Wave is book 2, again, another really fantastic cover. I will also say that we do get kind of multiple character POVs throughout all these books, but each book kind of focuses a little bit on one of the other mermaids in each story, so that's kind of nice. We got book 3 with, what is this? Dark Tide. Again, another book cover I love. We continue the story. It's good. I would definitely highly recommend it. And then we get to the last book, which is where the book cover love kind of ends for me. While I do wish I liked this book cover, I just can't because there's just something really weird going on with the tail here that's not very consistent with the other ones, so it just kind of threw me off in that way. But as for how this story ends, I would definitely rate this whole series for like a very solid 4 stars. I really liked it. The ending, I can't remember because it's been a while since I've read any of these mermaid books, but I think there was just something a little bit odd about this ending. but more importantly, while it did complete the major like story plot and action that was going on through the whole entire book series, it did leave you with kind of an ending that definitely suggests that there might be more to come, which I'm very excited, and I would definitely read more. So what I mean by that is, it definitely seems like they left it open for not necessarily the same group of mermaid characters, but you probably see them, but more so focusing on maybe a new generation of the mermaid characters dealing with an enemy or a nemesis that was sort of left unaccounted for at the end of this book. So I'm very curious to see if this author will write more and sort of continue this world in this series. But so far I haven't heard anything about it. Overall, this is definitely one of my more highly rated out of the mermaid books I have here on the top of my list. So I would recommend you guys check it out. Again, if you like that idea of sort of more the fantasy world with the modern world, mermaid princesses, lots of action, traveling the oceans kind of thing, that's a great series to read. Now, going back to a series that I would definitely lump more in the realm of what Tempest Rising was, so more heavy on the romance element, not so much the action and the adventure, we have Poseidon. So I have things to say about this. This is one of the book series. While I did read every single one in this trilogy, it's lower on my list. So I will explain. And so Poseidon, it is a very interesting twist on the... They're definitely not the traditional idea of a mermaid, which is kind of nice. It's refreshing to see that. And I rated the first book 5 stars. So overall, I rate the whole entire trilogy about 3 stars, because progressively as I go through the 3 books, my rating went lower. And so Poseidon, it was really good. I liked the romance between the characters. The action and sort of story is not too heavy. Like, it's not, at least I don't remember it being so like world shattering, like ending kind of thing, while, you know, Waterfire Saga definitely was more on like a possible world ending situation. This one, I don't really remember it being that way. Maybe because it just was more of the focus on the relationship between Galen and Emma. So again, I really liked the first book. And then we move on to the second book in the series, or the trilogy, which is Of Triton. And you'll notice that, oddly enough, this book is almost... It's about maybe a little bit more than half the size of the first one, which is very interesting and kind of odd. But I ended up rating this one 4 stars. It was not bad. It definitely wrapped up everything. It felt like an ending to me. This felt like an ending. And everything sort of ended up alright in the end. Which left me very confused when I went and I like knocked this off my list, and then I saw there was a 3rd book. What? So this is the reason why I rate this book trilogy so much lower than maybe some of the other ones, because of this one book. It's definitely a thicker one compared to Of Triton, and it just felt so incredibly unnecessary. Because again, when I read this, it felt like an ending. So I was very confused by this. This feels more like a side story, almost like a novella. And a big part of me was confused for the longest time, because I thought this was the order that these books went in. And honestly, I think that is the order that these books should have gone in. Unless you just kind of rewrote everything a little bit, like switch some things around. Because my biggest issue with this is, since this is a more romance-heavy book series, it's kind of, I find it very odd that the author did, to do a love triangle in the last book. Or at least attempt to do a love triangle in the last book. It's very, again, it feels very unnecessary. I do think, you know, the whole situation in this book is interesting and adds something, you know, kind of cool for the rest of the series that was maybe a point that was left unanswered, but it should have come earlier in the trilogy than, I think, being the last book. Especially since, in my opinion, you don't try to do a love triangle kind of rushed and forced at the end of your book series. If you want to set up a love triangle, you do it at the beginning, so that I think the readers have more time to sort of, you know, have that internal turmoil that the main protagonist is feeling, obviously being torn between, you know, 2 love interests. you don't do it at the end of your book series, is what I'm just saying. So that's my opinion on this. Well, I don't hate it, and I think, you know, if you have an interest in this book series, sounds interesting to you, if you look it up, you know, the of Poseidon, and see what it's about, sounds interesting to you, definitely pick it up and read it. Just be warned that maybe the final book in the series might seem a little odd to you. I don't know, it definitely did to me. Now moving on to another book series that, again, I would have to rate it something around like 3 stars for the overall package, just because, well, I'll get into it. So I'm talking about, what is this, the Water Song series. So right off the bat, this was definitely like a, what is it, the word I'm looking for? I don't know, this was just a buy that I saw it in Target, had no idea, never even heard of this book series, but I saw the cover, I was just like, I have a feeling I'm gonna really like this. And usually my intuition is pretty spot on when I have that feeling about a book, at least as far as the first book goes. I'm like, I really am gonna like this, and I do. And also, just for this whole series, like, Target really pulled through and giving me some really awesome copies of this series. So this one, hopefully the camera's picking up, has this really cool rainbow sheen, and then the inside cover actually has a whole big poster, so that's kind of neat. But overall, I really did like this first book a lot. It was the whole story is an interesting twist on both the Greek mythology of sirens as well as sort of the more modern idea of what we think of as a mermaid, and sort of combining those two ideas into a very dark kind of thing. So it's really neat. I would almost compare this to, as far as movies go, kind of like a little touch of Mean Girls meets The Craft meets something else. I don't know what the third thing would be, but it kind of reminds me of that. You know, we got a little bit of romance in this series, and some really good action, actually. So I definitely liked the first book. It set it up to be a really interesting thing. And then I was super excited to read the second book, Lullaby. And again, Target pulling through, and it's like there was a bunch of copies that were, I don't know, 100 or 200 something copies that were signed by the author, which I will mention, Amanda Hawking, I give her major props because I find it very cool that she was actually an author that got started on like Wattpad or just via online writing her stories and then getting published. So that's really neat, and I give her major props for that. And this book, again, it was super good. There was lots of good action. There was also set up for a lot of, for the next book, in that the next book following this, we would hopefully get a lot of really interesting answers to some questions that were set up here, especially with the character named Daniel. Especially with the character named Daniel. He has a very interesting point in this series, kind of a mysterious background, and so this book definitely set it up so that the third book would be answering those questions. That's where things kind of go downhill for me. So, well, I absolutely love the third book's cover. It's totally cool. This is the book that just went down. And that's what I kind of, for me, in my opinion, the third book, for any authors out there, if you're somehow watching this is the book in your series that you need to watch out for. It's the third book. Even with some authors that I absolutely love, like Rick Riordan, some of his books in the series, the third one can also, I find often, is that one that feels like it's missing something. It's like that kind of weird in-between limbo stage. And so be careful with your third book is just the message I'm sending here. But basically why this book was so disappointing to me is because we had such good build-up in Lullaby that when title came around, the sort of big reveals that we were kind of promised in Lullaby turned out to be just not what anybody was expecting, and not in a good way. It was very anticlimactic and just left you kind of like, is that really it? Like, I thought it would be something more exciting than that. So that's just what I remember feeling off of this book. Again, haven't read these in a very long time, so needless to say, title kind of left me with a feeling, especially moving into the final book in the series, which is Elegy. And this book is considerably thicker than any of the other ones. And because of that, one of my biggest sort of things to say about this is you could have probably cut out maybe 100 or so pages, or at least edit it differently so that it would be thinner and still tell about the same kind of story. So this one, I just remember it, I think, was a little bit more drawn out when you could have probably gotten to things a lot faster. What I will say is that I think it was in this book, there was a really fantastic action scene and battle fight thing that happened that was really cool to read. The overall ending, I don't really remember too much about the ending. I just remember it was like a kind of happy ending for everybody involved. So I still don't hate this series. I enjoyed reading it for the most part. It was just the case that the last 2 books were a little bit disappointing compared to the first books, which were big winners in my opinion. So that's my opinion on the Water Song series. Now we're going into my second, or actually my final YA book series that I will talk about, and I put this one sort of last because I feel like it is the one that is the most, even though this one had some pretty dark stuff in it, you'll know what I mean when you read it, or if you know what the Greek mythology behind sirens is, then you probably have an idea. But this one I would say is a little bit darker in the sense that this is the Lost Voices trilogy. And this is probably out of this whole group of the YA books, this is my favorite one. And beginning off, how the characters even become mermaids in this book series is very sad. It's very just kind of depressing and dark, but it's not too unrealistic to like some of the mythology behind mermaids. It very much fits with that. This is definitely more of the mermaid mythos of like sirens calling in ships and drowning sailors kind of thing, if you catch my drift. But you know, this is also a series where love interest kind of stuff, I think it does come in at the end of this book series, and it's definitely a feature in the second book, Waking Storms, but it's not like the crowning purpose behind anything in the book series. Really what we're focusing on for most of these books is more the relationship between the main character, whose name I'm forgetting, Luce. Her relationship between the other girl characters in this book, and the sort of semi-friendships and semi-rivalry kind of things. And, you know, the first book sets it up to her learning about this world, sort of trying to fit in, but it doesn't quite work out the way she expects because of moral issues. And then in the second book, we get the sort of part of the hero's journey where she kind of breaks off. She's going on things. She finds answers to sort of things that were set up in the first book. We get a little bit more of the love interest thing that was happening, and sort of that spins it off into her reasoning kind of for breaking off for the rest of the group in a sense. And then we get the final book in the trilogy, which is The Twice Lost. And this is one epic book as far as the story goes, because we get this whole big thing. It takes place mostly in San Francisco Bay, which is really cool because I grew up in the Northern California area, so I was in San Francisco quite a bit, so it was very kind of nostalgic in that sense, but it was pretty epic. I mean, what happens, what Luce does, it's pretty just like wow. And then my biggest sort of, the thing that really sold me for the ending of this series is that it has a very realistic ending, in that it's not the ending like you would get in one of these books. It's not like, oh, they're perfect, everything is so happy. While there is like, the issue gets resolved and it's happy in that sense, it's not like, oh, now we can be together in this romance kind of ending perfect thing. Like, no. The ending is something completely different and really matches the character development for Luce and just works, in my opinion. So I was very pleasantly surprised by that, and it's why I love this series so much. I mean, all the books were very exciting, very different from any of these other ones that I've mentioned here, in just a more dark and somber kind of tone, but still with that little bit of like the fantasy in there, of course, because it's mermaids. So this is probably my favorite out of all the YAs. Highly recommend if you want something a little bit different. Then we're getting to my final book for this video, which is the only adult book that I have that is mermaid theme. So if anybody who is watching up to this point, if you know of any good adult mermaid books, definitely like sound off in the comments down below and let me know, because I would love to read more. And so the one I'm going to be talking about is Goddess of the Sea, which is by P.C. Cass. And if that name sounds familiar as far as authors go, especially for those of you who are watching who are probably more into the YA books scene, P.C. Cass is actually the joint author with her and her daughter of the House of Night series. So if you're familiar with the House of Night series, then you'll probably get an idea of what the vibe is for this. And this is basically P.C. Cass adult sort of romance series. So this is a romance book, it is a romance series, and the whole premise of each book is it's its own story in the series, but it has the same sort of idea in the sense of these very, very modern women sort of being transported into these times where things are not quite as modern, but with the fantasy element, a lot of gods and goddesses sort of obviously take a feature in it. But this is the first one that she wrote, which is centered around, well, I'll just read it for the hell of it. So home alone on the night of her 25th birthday, U.S. Air Force Sergeant Christine Candy yearned for something to cure her loneliness. After drinking too much champagne, she recited a divine invocation to revive her humdrum life. But how was she to know the spell would actually work? When her plane crashes into the ocean, Cece's life changes forever. She awakens bewildered to find herself in a legendary time and place ruled by magic, and in the body of the mythical mermaid Undine. But danger lurks in the water, ready to swallow Cece whole. Taking pity on her, the goddess Gaia turns Cece into a damsel, so that she might seek shelter on the land. When a dashing knight comes to Cece's rescue, instead of falling for this dream come true, she aches for the sea and the darkly sexy merman who's stolen her heart. So yes, this is definitely, if you like sort of the Viking kind of time era, I'm trying to remember what exactly it is, but this is definitely a good book for you. If you like the romance, you like mermaids, mermen, adult romance, that kind of thing, knights, monks, islands, yeah, like this was my read on the beach one summer, a couple summers ago, and I absolutely enjoyed it. It was really good, and it definitely set me off to reading all the other books that P.C. Cass had, and I have about, I think altogether I have 4 out of the series, and I think there's about 6 books, and each one covers a different thing. I can also do a video talking about them at another point, because I really like some of the other ones in this book series as well, but this is definitely one of my favorites, especially out of the mermaid books. Obviously, it was a really fun read. So if you want something that's more adult, here you go. But yes, I would say I'd rate that book, oh yeah, I forgot to say that. I would rate this series definitely like 5 stars. Like, I loved it. And then this one, I would also say 5 stars. I really want to reread this one actually, especially since it's just like a solo book. It's its own contained story. So I'll probably reread it this summer for nostalgic reasons and just see if I still have the same opinion on it as I did the first time I read it. So yes, that is all of the physical mermaid books that I own. If there's any mermaid books that you guys know that I have not read here, definitely let me know in the comments down below, because I would love to read more and add more to my list. I do have some on my list that I haven't gotten yet. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and of course, if you'd like to check out any of my other content, my videos, subscribe, like this video, turn on the bell notification, and I have shop stuff at Redbubble with mermaid stuff on there. So if you like mermaids, I do have some prints I think that are mermaid related and all that good stuff. So yes, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great day, guys.